This
Community of
conference
Practice
will now be
webinar.
recorded.
Thank you everyone for joining us today. We're really excited to bring today's presentation to you. We are joined by Katja Brundiers and Jordan King from Arizona State University. And again, this is Emily Quinton from Portland State, and we have Rochelle Haddock from University of Calgary also helping to run today's webinar. Before we begin, just a couple of quick announcements for the group. You may have seen an email to the campus's lab community of practice about this year's Campus as Living Lab curated track that will be offered at the 2020 ASHE conference. This will be the second year in a row that this curated track is being offered. And so we just want to encourage everybody that is part of the community of practice and joining these monthly calls to consider submitting a proposal. By submitting a proposal to the track, it's kind of a secondary topic that you're indicating. So anybody that submits a proposal and indicates their interest in being included in the track, that will be reviewed by a review committee that we have from this community. And the final track will ensure that there's at least one session during every slot in the conference agenda that is related to Campus as a Living Lab. So anyways, we encourage you to consider submitting a proposal, and you're more than welcome to reach out to Rochelle and I if you're interested in, say, developing a panel presentation, but you want to get connected to other folks. We can help make those connections. So that's the first announcement. And then also wanted to mention that there are some other webinars that have been coming up through, email lists like through ASHE, just to keep your eyes on those. There are other good sort of related applied learning projects, webinars and resources that are out there. I have none to mention right now because I think one just happened in the last couple of weeks, but in case you're not getting those emails, I do encourage you to sign up for them. So with that, we will get started. Again, for folks that are joining today, please make sure to keep yourself muted during the call, but during Q&A, you can have the option to unmute yourself and or use the chat box to ask questions or provide comments. But I'm going to introduce our speakers today. We have Katja Brundiers, an assistant clinical professor at the School of Sustainability at Arizona State. Katja's research and teaching relates to whole person and project-based educational approaches, sustainability competencies, and professional skill development, as well as collaborative methods supporting knowledge co-creation among students and practitioners. She employs these approaches and Campus as Living Lab projects, and we're very excited to have her presenting today. Katja also investigates the notion of disasters as opportunity for change towards sustainability, building off her empirical research in Christchurch, New Zealand, and in Indonesia. Her current research explores how to leverage change processes to advance sustainability. Jordan King is a PhD student in the School of Sustainability at Arizona State. His work focuses on connecting sustainability in higher education, specifically through leadership, assessment, and innovative experiences for students. After receiving his master's degree in human dimensions of natural resource management and environmental education, Jordan spent several years as a university instructor and worked as an administrator at a sustainability-focused campus field station. He's currently working as a graduate fellow for the National Council for Science and the Environment to support implementing competencies-based education and sustainability programs in higher ed. So we will turn it over to Katja and Jordan. Katja and Jordan, please feel free to add any additional background info about yourselves that I may have missed. And we will turn to Q&A after the presentation, and folks are, again, welcome to send any questions via the chat box throughout.
Okay, thank you so much to everyone for inviting us and giving us the opportunity to talk to you all today about key competencies in sustainability, creating change agents through applied projects. Jordan and I, we will iterate our talking points. So I take the first couple of slides. And I just want to go over the agenda with you, which is we have basically two parts. The first part will be one where John and I will speak a lot. Then we will have a quick activity with we try to do a poll. We will go to the details as we get there. And then we will really frame the discussion with you. So the first part is, what are the key competencies in sustainability and how do we use them to create sustainability on campus? And we will focus on three main topics. We will give a description of the key competencies in sustainability, drawing on the framework of key competencies in sustainability. Then we will explain a little bit how we could go about linking academic and operational sustainability through the framework of key competencies in sustainability. And we try to become a little bit more clearer by giving an example of the key competencies in sustainability when used in an applied learning project. And I saw we have Liska Richter on the call, which is amazing because we used one of the projects that were done at the UBC campus. And so I already look forward to hear Liska's comments and further explanations. So after this kind of lecture part, we then really have the poll, and then we would like to discuss with you and hear your ideas how we can use the framework of key competencies in sustainability to support the work that we are doing individually and collectively as an emerging field. What could be pathways for competency development, and then obviously looking at all your questions. That might have sounded a little bit theoretically, but we wanted to start off with introducing here to you Dr. Braden Kay, who is a change agent for sustainability. You see he is an ASU alumni. He has done his PhD at the School of Sustainability. He works now as the first director of sustainability ever that the city of Tempe has. And the assessment that Braden Kay is truly a change agent for sustainability is not just my personal bias, but Braden also recently received two awards. One is the 2019 Gaby Zimmerman Award for Excellence in Public Service with a focus on sustainability. And also in 2019, he was awarded the School of Sustainability Outstanding Graduate Award for the real world changes that he was able to produce through his work. And we brought you here a quote. We conducted a brief interview with him to kind of evaluate to what extent he internalized the key competencies in sustainability and is able to apply those in his daily work, and what the results are of these kind of applications. And so he said, I hope to share the story of how our elected officials, city staff, business community, and residents are all working together to lower carbon emissions, build a more sustainable economy, invest in clean energy and sustainable transportation, and improve the lives of our residents while focusing on social equity. So as we go through this presentation, you will see just how this quote really entails a variety of the key competencies that Braden is able to put into action for sustainability. And with this, I hand it over to Jordan, who will talk to us what are these competencies and why do we need them.
Yeah, so I'm going to take some time to describe and give a little bit of background on these key competencies and how they're related, so we can begin to have a focus on applying them in the projects that we're doing, and also comprehend how they might already be a part of the projects that all of you are working on as well. And so the key competencies and sustainability framework brings together these 6 competencies, and they interact to ultimately work towards solving problems in sustainability. And so these competencies include systems thinking, futures thinking, values thinking, strategic thinking, and then these are supported by an interpersonal competence, really how to work together, and then those all build towards solving sustainability problems. So we want to walk through each of these in a little bit closer detail to understand what they might entail, what sort of concepts they're building on, and how they can then be applied in addressing sustainability issues on your campus. So the first one is systems thinking competence, and this really focuses on analyzing sustainability problems across different domains and scales, and then looking at how to consider all of those factors and develop an understanding of that system and the different components of it that might be causing sustainability problems, but also that can be addressed to help create solutions. And so as we think about systems thinking, it definitely is helpful for anticipating future trajectories of problems, identifying these intervention points, and then beginning to understand how the strategies we design and implement are going to be effective at addressing different components of these problems. And so if we're able to conceive of these issues in systems, they often get a much fuller and richer picture of what's occurring and how we can begin to address it.
And just a quick addition here, we will not go into the details with this in our competencies. That's why I just wanted to say it at the very first one. Under the definition, what is systems thinking competency? There's also literature that provides a good overview of what kind of theories exist. For example, resilience theory is a systems thinking theory, and what kind of methods exist so that students can actually think in systems. So, for example, with quantitative modeling, you can use a software that's called Stella, and that helps you to model a system in quantitative ways and get at these cause effect structures, etc. You can also use a qualitative method, and that could be like a concept map where you have people draw out their perceptions and what they think are relationships and where they see trade-offs and where they see the driving factors or the effects and whether how they evaluate these effects. So that's just what I wanted to say. For every competency, there is what we call a menu of concepts, theories, as well as methods that we can use in our project to act on those competencies.
Yeah, thanks. I think it's helpful to have that background and understand we're trying to give an overview and a brief understanding of these. And one other thing I'll point out before we move on is in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, there are those icons that sort of match with these competencies, just as a way for us to organize and see how they might be interacting. So we'll return to those later. So our second competency then is futures thinking or anticipatory competency. And this is really trying to envision how problems and solutions might evolve over time, and then being able to, within those visions, consider the different alternatives or pictures that we can devise for the future. And so as we think about futures thinking, it really helps us in orienting our planning activities, developing these different responses or possibilities, and also thinking about the actions that we take, how they might have impacts, and exercising precaution then, and also motivating change so that the futures that we begin to craft are considered, are deliberate, and understanding of the whole picture and the different possibilities of how we begin to solve these sustainability problems.
And my last interjection, I just read a report that Mr. Elkington gave at the occasion of the Green Biz conference this year, and Mr. Elkington is labeled the Dean of Corporate Social Responsibility in the business world, and he really made a plea why future thinking is so utterly important. He was at a dinner with the founder of the internet, Mr. Cerf, and the founder of the internet was asked why they didn't see hacking coming or the other stuff, the privacy issues, etc., that we now are experiencing with the internet, aside from all the positive benefits. And then the founder of the internet was saying, well, we were so preoccupied with, wrapping our head around the technology and making sure that this works and getting it out the door. We didn't have any bandwidth to think about future possibilities or the consequences that could be unleashed through this technology. And so for Mr. Elkington, this was really the point that we often invest in a project, in developing a new technology, driving some innovative change without really thinking through the potential unintended consequences that might result, or anticipating what future positive opportunities could come around and what the evidence is that suggested. And he calls these positive options green swans, in contrast to what we know as the black swans, as these things that nobody saw coming, and all of a sudden they are devastating. And he argues that these surprises don't just occur out of the blue. They occur out of the blue because we are not often enough engaging critically and systemically with thinking about the future. So I just wanted to add a little bit of real-world relevance to the competence with this example from the Green Biz conference.
Great. Our third competence is values thinking, and this is really one that comes up throughout the process of addressing sustainability issues. It is the ability to collectively map, specify, apply, reconcile, and negotiate sustainability values, and also different objectives, goals, and targets. And this can be very beneficial as we try to weigh the different options that we have in trying to address these issues. I think it's important when we discuss values thinking to recognize that in developing this competency, it's not about developing a certain set of values, but rather helping our students and stakeholders to realize that the values that they bring to the table in addressing sustainability issues are critically important and must be considered in able to create these sustainability visions that we have for moving forward. Next is strategic thinking, and this competency is all about how to then begin this problem-solving process by collectively designing and implementing different interventions and transition strategies that move towards sustainability. So these other parts or other competencies are definitely feeding into strategic thinking, and this is really being able to begin designing and then carrying out those plans within different contexts to create the changes that we're looking for. Yes. And as we move forward then, our next competency is a step forward and relates all of those different competencies, and it's interpersonal or collaborative competency. And this is really the ability to work with others, to act as leaders, and to be able to communicate and engage with different stakeholders. As we address sustainability issues, it often is not just an individual act, but something that's happening collectively. And so this competency definitely emphasizes the need to work together in teams, often with a diverse set of stakeholders that could be on the campus, ranging from students, faculty, and staff to people outside of campus and community members as well. And so this competency supports the others that we've described and is able to help co-create knowledge, build capacity, and then develop shared ownership of these strategies for addressing sustainability issues. All of these then build towards our integrated problem-solving competency, and this is being able to utilize problem-solving frameworks and apply them in different contexts to address specific problems and develop viable solution options. And this competency is bringing all of these others together in a framework which we'll show you in just a moment, then to finally solve these problems. So it's important for us to consider how these different competencies interact and recognize that each of them is a valuable tool in solving these sustainability issues and being able to understand the context that they're happening within.
And so here we show you one way of how we can think about the processes for integrated problem solving. And in the next slide, we will show you how the competencies map on this process. So just briefly, process here, for example, starts with understanding a complex problem, framing it, and understanding it in its current situation as well as in its history. And then we can think about this problem and thinking about if we do nothing, how will this problem evolve in the future? That leads us then to the right side of the slide where it says non-intervention future scenarios. And if we think about the future in different ways and think about, well, what future would we actually like to create and live in and leave to our children and grandchildren, then we are getting into the visioning process. And if we add in sustainability values such as intergenerational justice or social equity, ecosystem integrity, participatory economies, etc., then we create sustainability vision. So with this, we have the two key reference points for any action. We know the problem and how the problem evolved over the past. We know where we could be going if we do nothing. We know where we want to go to our sustainability vision. And we can think of sustainability transition strategies and explore where would we need to intervene in our current situation and going forward to really navigate towards the desired sustainability vision. And this is a framework that started with analyzing the problem, but you can use the same framework and you start at the right side and you start out with thinking about the vision, and then you backcast from there to understanding your problem and you develop the strategy. So this approach would then be called backcasting. And I'm just saying this to say, if we have this kind of framework in mind, there are different entry points, but eventually we need to hit all points in order to come around full circle with developing a solution strategy. So with this next slide, I wanted to just show how the key competencies map onto that framework. When we engage in understanding a problem, its complexities, we use obviously systems thinking. But when we frame why is this a problem for whom, then obviously we employ values. So that's why you see the two icons there. When we think about the future, like the non-intervention future scenarios that employ future thinking, we craft scenarios or trend extrapolations, etc. And we use systems thinking because we want to be as sophisticated in thinking about the future as we are in thinking about present and past. If we then add values thinking to it, it becomes the sustainability vision. The strategies is where we employ strategic competence. How do we get things done? With whom do we need to partner? How can we overcome challenges? What are carriers, etc. And as we mentioned, every competence is really the ability to collectively analyze the problem, collectively think about the future, collectively develop strategies. And that's why the interpersonal competence reaches out to all of them. And with this, we are now moving on to think about how we can utilize the competencies in campus operations. And I just wanted to kind of go over a few points. So we believe we can employ that framework towards sustainability in campus operations. The same framework can also be used on an academic level, not just on the operations and facilities level, but on an academic level to help us inform curriculum and learning for students. And then if we bring those two branches together, we can create applied learning projects. So I think many of us here embrace the idea of the whole institution and how the whole institution can create change. And what we mean with the whole institution is that we really think of operations, the institutes and departments, and then the degree programs, the educational branch, as being part of the same institution. So for ASU, achieving sustainability means for operations that we coordinate, that our wonderful staff in facilities development and management coordinate activities around renewable energy, energy efficiency, zero waste, green building design, construction, procurement, and sustainable landscaping, and more. For the department goal here, the School of Sustainability is embedded in the Julie and Whittle Global Institute of Sustainability, and the mission of that institute is to coordinate sustainability solutions facilitate engagement, support education, and research to enable better life. And then the educational goals, if you would go to our undergraduate degree programs and you hit the label what you will learn, you will see that we try to formulate educational learning objectives for our undergraduate students so that they become the change agents and they want as a sustainability professional or sustainability scholar. So here's just a quick snapshot from ASU's sustainability plan, where you see the sustainability goals on one side, and we mapped the key competencies that were most clearly emphasized. Obviously, any sustainability goal would require, as we have seen from the sustainability problem-solving process, it would require that we bring to bear all steps of the process and the competencies. But for simplification purposes, we just wanted to draw out those that seem to be the most obvious. And so if we think about how can we use applied learning to achieve those one or several of those sustainability goals, or to contribute through applied learning to the achievement of those goals, how can we then incorporate the competencies so that students make a real-world contribution while at the same time developing the knowledge, the skills, and the attitudes that form the competencies. And to support that, we created, with a colleague of mine, Katja from Portland State University, we created a framework, and I just wanted to show you the two main axes of that framework. That helps us to link sustainability initiatives on the operational level with learning opportunities for students to generate impact and facilitate meaningful teaching and learning experiences. So on this slide, you see how we can think about each individual project as making a contribution to long-term change towards those sustainability goals. And we are drawing here on a theory of change that is called transition management. And transition management believes that long-term social ecological change occurs over 4 phases. And these 4 phases are distinct from each other. And the first one is pre-development, where it's crucial to have a clear vision and a plan to move forward. With this vision, we can create buy-in because people might feel motivated to work towards positive social change. Second phase is the takeoff, where the goal is really to work with a small team of allies to grow the vision, improve it, bring it to others, and also bring more people in. That then puts us in a good position for the third phase, which is called acceleration, and where the idea is to further spread it out by empowering others to participate and to continuously drive innovation. And hopefully, with growing the initiative, we can get it to a new normal where, this new practice becomes the standard and kind of pushes the outdated practices aside. So here it's really about the phases, and then this slide speaks about how can we work in each of these phases with the focus on academics, operations, and research. And so we identified 4 pathways, and we detailed also additional actions in each pathway. One is laying the foundation of the program, so that is where you really think systemically about the change and where you try to continuously integrate and synthesize what you're doing in the other 3 pathways. Building pathways to solution-oriented sustainability learning is really about designing learning activities that empower students to engage with the key competencies in sustainability. Connecting projects to programs helps us to move beyond the one-off type of project and think, how can one project link to the next one, and really become a program, and how can we find partners who would be willing to sponsor a 2 or 3 year program so that we can make some larger steps. And then the third one is creating an enabling institutional environment where it's about getting buy-in from our leadership, from our deans, from the leadership in operations, as well as getting buy-in from our constituents, the students, and other stakeholders. And so if you bring those 2 axes together, you see we have on the top, we move along the 4 phases, and then the blue and green colored shapes really should symbolize the different pathways And we added for each pathway, we added some kind of pivotal milestone actions that could be implemented specifically for that phase. And most important is that we think of the 3 lower pathways as coming together in the upper one, and the upper one is also trying to top-down integrate the other 3.
So now we want to sort of bring together what we've discussed, giving you the background on these competencies, and then starting to think about how they can be applied in the context that all of you are working within. So we're going to give an example of a project at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver of how they addressed a sustainability issue. And what Katja and I did then is consider how the competencies might have played a role in this process, and sort of map out their usefulness in different steps of the project, and then put it together with that sustainability problem-solving framework that we showed you earlier. So we'll start by giving a little bit of background on this project, which was to support bird-friendly design on buildings. To understand the context of this, UBC is home to pathways for migratory birds, and an issue had developed on campus where these birds were colliding with windows on buildings and other structures because of the reflective properties and the lack of design that would deter the birds from flying into these buildings. And so it started to become a problem on campus, something that students, faculty, and staff were determined to begin solving for a bunch of different reasons relating to social, environmental, and even economic aspects of this issue. So the students, faculty, and staff then at UBC, as part of this SEEDS research project, found a way to use their campus as a living laboratory and set out some objectives to guide their process in addressing this bird strike issue. And those 3 objectives were to 1, find a way to develop a deeper understanding of the issue, 2, identify and pilot solutions, and 3, throughout the way, engage the community and make sure to raise awareness and also inspire action to resolve this issue. So that led to 3 different projects that worked in unison to tackle the issue of bird strikes on the UBC campus. The first project was monitoring the extent and quantity of these bird strikes, determine how often they were happening on campus, what factors such as species or season were maybe influencing this, and really develop a clearer picture as to what the problem was, and maybe begin to identify some possible ways to move forward. The second project had to do with developing window treatments as a deterrent for birds flying into these buildings and windows. One center on campus developed feather-friendly treatments that added some texture and layer to the windows so that as birds flew towards them, they could recognize that they were part of a structure. And there's also a student art competition hosted on campus, which you can see some of the results of as wrapping on windows. So that's a great example of a way to not only develop the solution, but do so in a way engaging multiple stakeholders and bringing lots of different interest groups into the solution as well. The third project then was the students worked in unison with faculty and staff to develop some standards that would help in building of new structures and buildings. And these standards then also help to inform a handbook for facilities and operation managers that would help you with strategies for bird-friendly design so that not only in the present but moving forward, this issue could be mitigated and solved by the efforts of a large group of people from different backgrounds and different interests in addressing this issue of bird strikes. So with that sort of understanding of this project and a quick overview, we wanted to think more closely about how these competencies were put into action, and we'd like to have you think about this, and we'll give you a little bit of time here in just a minute to think about which competencies might have been used in these 3 different projects and how they might have interacted to help develop a solution. So we'll ask you to consider these 3 questions at the top. Which competencies were utilized by students, faculty, and staff in the bird-friendly design project? Second, in which step of the sustainability problem-solving process that we discussed before might they have been used? And then how were they used, and what activities that were happening as described in breaking down those projects might they have used to connect the competencies to the solution they were developing. On our next slide, we'll give you sort of the template for what to consider. We have those key competencies that we discussed at the beginning, and then we also have those different steps in our framework that moves towards solving the sustainability issues. So the problem identification at first, and analyzing it, framing it, beginning to think about the scenarios that would happen without intervention, or what the vision might be for the future, assessing those options, developing a strategy, and then finally synthesizing the problem and implementing the solution. So we'd like you to think about which competencies were used in which step of that problem-solving process, and which activities that we briefly described might have been connected to that. And so we'll give you approximately 2 minutes to think about that. Feel free to engage in the chat box here as well if you have an example. And then after those 2 minutes, we'll run through our framework to show you some of the things that we identified as examples of the competencies being used in this project. All right, so we are going to move forward and give you some of the examples of how we thought these competencies might have been applied in this project. And so we wanted to, again, echo those objectives that the SEEDS research project set out in addressing this issue, and then walk you through the sustainability problem-solving framework and how the different competencies might have been applied within this example. So if we start out with our problem framing and analysis, we can see in this instance, we're using systems thinking and values thinking to understand the problem and all of the different factors going into it, and begin weighing how different groups might have been involved or interested in the problem and its potential solution. and beginning then to engage and think about working together to address the issue. And then second would be the thinking about what the non-intervention future would look like. So using futures thinking to understand what might continue to happen without addressing this problem. And then envisioning what the more sustainable future could look like. Using both futures thinking and values thinking to understand what the ideal situation might be and how people could work together to begin developing that intervention that leads to this envisioned future. The next step would be assessing these potential options and using values thinking to weigh those different alternatives and what might be most desirable in this situation. And then using the strategic thinking to develop a way forward and how to navigate this. In this instance, it was the bird-friendly design guidelines was one of the examples of how to develop a strategy and use it to target that vision that we had together. And then finally, synthesizing this issue and implementing this problem-solving framework in order to address the issue of bird strikes and implement some different projects such as the guidelines, the window treatments, and the collaboration with multiple stakeholders on campus. So we also wanted then to just break down where these different projects might have laid out on this framework after giving a more general overview. And so we'll go through this a little bit quickly so we can have some time for questions and answers. But this, as Katja mentioned before, we do have these sort of menu of concepts and methods that entail each of the competencies. And so you can see that throughout the steps in the process, different competencies are being used at different points in time, but they're interacting within each of these projects to begin addressing the issue. And so as you can see here, we've laid out which competencies might have been used in which elements of this process in the different projects, and then given an example of a concept or method that might have gives a little bit more specific description of how that competency is used and why it might be relevant in that step. So this would be project one, and we can see that the other projects as well have begun to lay out a different set of competencies being used at different points to really be effective and interact to develop a final solution for the bird strike problem. We'll just move forward to project three, and you can see that throughout, values thinking is something that is definitely very important. Same with interpersonal competency and being able to engage and motivate different stakeholders and work together to solve these issues. So if we bring all three of those projects together, we can see that collectively, a diverse set of stakeholders are working together throughout multiple projects to address this sustainability issue. And at the core of this problem solving, were a host of these competencies working together and interacting to develop sustainability problem solving framework and apply it in this example at UBC.
So just to wrap up in the next 2 minutes and then have at least 10 minutes for discussion. So we hope that with this example, we could show you how the competencies help us to use the help to build problem-solving capacity to meaningfully integrate problem analysis, sustainability assessment, visioning, and strategy building. With mapping the different projects onto the framework, we could also demonstrate that there are different problem-solving frameworks that came together in this example. And overall, this was a great example to show how we can develop viable solution options. And we didn't speak too much about how they considered the roadblocks and barriers to supporting sectors, the role of politics and power and authority, but those would be all other aspects that definitely I'm sure the team experienced as one element of supporting change in fostering sustainability transition. So now we just wanted to go one step deeper and think about how can we design learning activities in applied projects. And we found that the notion of constructive alignment is a really valuable tool when we think about breaking projects down into learning activities for students. So obviously we started with learning objectives, and these were very nicely laid out by the UBC project. We also then move on to think about what learning activities help students to learn those objectives, and how can we assess it to demonstrate students that they have actually developed those competencies or activities, but also obviously to give a grade. And assessment in this case, with on campus, in campus living lab projects, also includes an assessment not only from an academic perspective, but also an assessment from the professionals and the practitioners. And I think this is a hugely important assessment to hear back how does my work appear in the eyes of the professional experts and how do they assess it. So really trying to align objectives with activities and assessments, that is the idea of ensuring constructive alignment.
So just show a quick example of maybe how these different projects each were able to align their objectives, activities, and assessments as just a way of designing this so that it can be not only academically beneficial, but creates a meaningful outcome for campus operations as well by really tying this together in an applied learning project. And just to reflect on this project, it is a very nice example of how these key competencies can be used and work together to accomplish solving a sustainability issue, bringing together different perspectives and disciplines and stakeholders from students, faculty, and staff, and really blending that academic side into campus sustainability operations and helping these people to succeed as sustainability professionals. So we hope that with this example and the background and the key competencies, that this can be a framework that you can utilize to create change on your campus today and in the future. So we thank you for the opportunity to discuss, and we'll open it up for some Q&A.
Thank you so much, Jordan and Katja. This is Rochelle Haddock, and I'll kick off our discussion with a question that I have. And a comment. First off, really wonderful presentation, and I loved how you presented it in such a nice, concise, and clear way how these competencies can result in sustainability change on campus. Something that I often wonder about is how do we scale up the use of the framework of sustainability competencies amongst academics on our campuses, because I think a lot of instructors are really good at incorporating learning objectives, but they're not always making that link into sustainability competencies unless they're, perhaps a subject matter expert or teaching in sustainability. And I wonder if you have ideas on how we can cultivate an environment where academics are continually thinking about, oh, this is cultivating X, Y, and Z competencies when I engage in these activities.
I think one of the first response to that is as these faculty design their learning objectives, it's really important to, one, keep these competencies in mind, but then two, think about these sort of applied learning projects as a way to take what they're doing beyond the classroom. I think in a lot of cases, it can be easy to get consumed in what's happening academically, that there's missed opportunities to apply that to things on campus, because there are often efforts moving forward to support sustainability or opportunities to develop those efforts. So it can be a really positive way by looking to extend this outside of the classroom, engaging campus stakeholders, and utilizing different resources to begin to start to multiply the effect of these competencies and sustainability learning to have.
Maybe just to add 2 more points to this. It's a great and really timely question, and I'm involved in trying to explore answers to this question in 2 ways. One is I'm a member of the graduate committee for our Masters of Sustainability Solutions program, and this is one of the first of our master's program where at the School of Sustainability we really try to integrate the key competencies as program level learning outcomes. So not just as we discussed today on the level of the project, but what does this mean for the level of a program outcome? And as part of this effort, we have been trying to teach ourselves in the committee the competencies and how we understand it. And we were trying to develop assignments and rubrics that over time allow students to work towards those competencies. And we also really started to speak with students about those key competencies. So I think what we are doing here is on the one hand side build literacy around key competencies among us as faculty, and then in our engagement with students, so hoping that the students can bring out this language when they speak with themselves, with their friends, parents, and future employers. So that's one way how we try to scale it up. And the trigger really was that we said we would like to formulate program level learning outcomes. And that's maybe my other part of the answer, and where Jordan is extremely instrumental in helping us with, is that with NCSE, the National Council of Science and the Environment, we are thinking around similar questions. We started out thinking, how can we agree on the key competencies as a framework for generating program level learning objectives? So that's what we aspire to generate on a program level for undergraduate students in sustainability or sustainability related programs. And then now we are in the second phase of assuming we can get to such an agreement, how can we train everyone in the institution, starting with faculty, to recognize the values that this framework might have for their course and participate in the development of these program level learning objectives. And I think once we have program level learning objectives, we can try to measure the outcomes, and then we can also use it really as a communication tool with the various audiences that we interact.
That's wonderful. I think lots of food for thought. I especially love the idea of creating literacy about these competencies. I think you really have success when you've done that. Looking at the comment box, you have a couple of compliments. People have shared with you. Liska was expressing her gratitude for selecting SEEDS project, saying it was a very useful analysis and that she's going to try to apply it to other projects. And Wendy has commented that she has just applied for an internal grant to fund mini grants to encourage students and faculty to collaborate on applied learning projects. So two comments in response to your presentation. Anyone else like to put? Oh yeah, go ahead, Jordan.
I would just say I think that's great. Obviously, these things are really happening already, and the competencies framework is meant to just support and further the efforts that people are already making, and give a little bit of guidance to approaching it in a way that is going to increase its impact, hopefully.
Yeah, wonderful. Not seeing any other questions here. I'll tack on selfishly another question from myself. Do you think that there are any sustainability competencies that are missing from your framework?
It's a great question. So the framework is called the Key Competencies in Sustainability Framework, arguing, that these are just the key competencies that in conjunction support sustainability problem-solving processes. And then we just did, so there are 2 studies that have been underway. One for NCSE, we did the study, a small Delphi study to exactly address the question you asked. And then in parallel, there was also a research project carried out through collaboration between ASU and Leuphana University in Germany called Educating Future Change Agents. And I can send the link around. There will be a symposium on this in March, and maybe there is an option for people who are interested to Zoom in, to join from remote. And this Educating Future Change Agent project explored a similar question: are these all competencies, or what competencies are missing? And what came out from both studies was the base discussion around not only interpersonal competence, the ability to collaborate with others, but we need to stress intrapersonal abilities so that we can manage ourselves. Like we hear a lot about people grief and climate change traumas, and how do we deal with the immense pressures that I'm sure you all experience on the ground of getting up every morning and maintaining, a positive outlook and building up inner resilience. So that was suggested to be added. The question is whether it's a competence or an attitude, but that's more like a definition of technicality. Also, implementation competence. Jordan spoke to this, and that has been identified really as the key missing competence. It's not just learning how we can think about these things, but really giving students the opportunity to apply that and implement it and run through the problems that implementation brings. And I think there is the Campus Living Lab network is such a valuable resource, because that's where you're already providing a lot of examples and insights for us.
And really quickly, just to add to that, the competencies and sustainability are also, supported by basic academic skills that we're all trying to create in our students in higher education. So whether it's critical thinking or communication skills, quantitative or qualitative literacy, all of those things work in conjunction with the sustainability competencies.
And maybe you noticed we didn't mention any disciplinary knowledge like water or understanding carbon cycles, etc. But the idea is that the framework can be applied to food, water, social justice themes, because it's not bound to a disciplinary content, but it works complementary with topical content knowledge. And I think now we're already out of time, so I'm saying nothing anymore.
Well, thank you for your answer. That's wonderful. And I wonder if Katja, you could provide, if you're comfortable, the link for the Future Change Agents webinar. We can perhaps share it with our community of practice. And looking at the time, I know we could continue talking about this, but want to honor everybody's time and energy. And on behalf of Emily, myself, and the members of the community of practice, Jordan and Katja, we really want to thank you for your time and energy and ideas and work in this important field. So thank you very much.
Yes, thanks everyone for having me.
Yeah. And one last comment, we have yet to determine our March webinar. So if you would like to play a role in coming up with a topic and curating either a speaker or a panel of speakers, both Emily and I would love to hear from you. And also wish all of you a wonderful rest of your day and rest of your week. Thanks again. Bye, everyone.